Beloveds, today we are joined by the DC office. We have Reverend Michael Neurath, who is the director of our DC office. We have Hannah Santos, who is our communications and campaign specialist of the UCC Office of Public Policy and Advocacy. And we have Helen Nuabara, who is our international policy advocate. And they're joining us for our final session of our What's Next special offering. We started this series last September, with the DC office. So we find it so fitting to close this conversation with you. And so I am so honored to be in this work alongside of you, even if it's across the country. What a gift you are. I know how very tired you all must be, how busy you must be, but thank you for making time here. And so as I invite you to the screen here to unmute, I'm curious, how is it with your soul today?
Well, thank you, Ellie. Thank you, Andrea, on the back end. It's such a key question these days, because I feel like my soul is pendulum swinging back and forth, but I'd say today it is worn but resilient.
Amen. I love that. Worn and resilient. How about you, Hannah or Helen?
Yeah, thank you again so much for having us, and thank you all who are joining from near and afar. Today, my soul is feeling quite recharged. I had a really lovely time this weekend with my loved ones, spent a lot of time in nature, and I'm coming into this Monday with a full cup, which feels very, very beautiful.
Oh, that is amazing. Yeah, taking time for yourself and for your family, right? We take time for ourselves, but to be with family, to be in nature, what a gift. Thank you. Helen.
Yeah, I would say my soul is tired but feeling very excited and nourished. I got to spend the weekend with the Global Ministries board meeting and some of our international board members and our mission coworkers. And while it is definitely a interesting thing to hear about all that is going on in the world and our contributions, it is wonderful to be together in hope and in faith and in a space where we know we will continue to nurture each other.
Amen. I love that. Thank you so much, Helen, for that. I appreciate that. And I'm glad you got to be with people from all across the globe. That must have been just mind-blowing how filled with spirit that room must have been at that time. And so I'm going to check out and turn it over to you, Michael, to kind of lead us in conversation about where we left off from last year and what is it that we can look forward to moving forward. So thank you all.
All right, thank you, Ellie. And thank you, Andrea, for pulling up some slides here. Well, welcome to 1 year later, Countering Project 2025 with Love. So first off, we wanted to start with just a quick summary of what our office is as part of the United Church of Christ national setting. So we are your office here in Washington. If you're ever coming to DC for a protest, for an advocacy meeting, we really do encourage you to stop by and visit us. We are right across from the Capitol, right next to the Supreme Court in the United Methodist Building. The United Church of Christ has had a presence here in Washington really since the 1940s through our predecessor denominational bodies. But I really count 1975 at General Synod 10 as a key change in which the then Office of Church and Society, which was established at that General Synod, was called on to staff a Washington, D.C. office. And with that came with it a kind of a mandate that reflects our current mission, which is really focused on legislative advocacy. The work that we do here is guided always by General Synod resolutions, and we see ourselves aligning with the UCC's mission to build a just world for all. We also work very closely in partnership, not only across all settings of the church, but also with interfaith and ecumenical partners here in DC through a network that's called WISC, the Washington Interfaith Staff Community. This is our team. So I'm the director. I've been in the office for about 18 years. Started as an intern and then spent about 15 years as the international policy advocate. Took over as director about 3 years ago. You can see Helen here is with us. Hannah here is with us. Justin is our program assistant. And Cassandra, Justin Henry, program assistant, who can help you if you're making arrangements to come to DC and want to stop by. He's more than happy to help make that possible. Any groups that you want to bring with you, like youth groups, confirmation groups, others. And then Cassandra Saunders is our 2-year Justice and Peace Policy Fellow. There is a missing tile here. We do have a domestic policy staff. And that position, we are currently searching for a new domestic policy advocate, and hopefully we'll have someone identified by probably sometime in December. All right, so let me, what we're going to be delving into today is, as you know, is Project 2025. So I know all of you have seen about this in the news, and we, our resource 1 year ago kind of laid a little bit of the groundwork for this, but just for those of you who may be new or haven't been as inundated with the media around this project, I'm going to summarize it really quickly for you. So this was developed by the Heritage Foundation and allied think tanks. Project 2025, and really the mandate for leadership is this aspect of 2025, Project 2025 that we're thinking of today, is essentially a policy guide which was established for the incoming administration, and a playbook of actions to be taken within the first 180 days of office. It also includes recommendations and a database for how to essentially remake the whole of the federal government. While President Trump distanced himself from it during the campaign, as you may remember, upon taking office, the daylight quickly closed. And we've seen many of the document's authors now appointed to key agencies, such as Russell Vought in the Office of Management and Budget, Brendan Carr in the Federal Communications Commission, and others. As you can see, the influence just from a personnel is policy, they say here in DC. You can see even from that perspective how much of an impact this effort has made on the federal government. 1 year ago, again, our office put out this resource, Countering Project 2025 with Love, that outlined our opposition to these policies. And over the past year, we've seen the destruction and cruelty that these policies have wrought on our nation and on the world. We really do believe here that the basic goals, values, and recommendations of Project 2025 stand in direct opposition to our values of the United Church of Christ, our mission to build a just world for all, and as such, we must keep countering it with love. So first, let me just go through a bit about the document itself. Here it is by the numbers. The size and scope of this document cannot, and its influence cannot be over-exaggerated, in my opinion. It's a massive effort that started back in 2022, so over 2.5 years in the making. Again, it's not really just a document, policy document, but really a plan to fundamentally reshape American society, democracy, and our government. It's been 10 months, 294 days since inauguration, and a significant amount of Project 2025 has already been implemented. There's a couple different websites that track the progress that's been made in quotes, on Project 2025. And one of them that I looked at recently said that currently already over 48% of it has already been implemented. They looked at the 319 kind of discrete objectives, already 120 of them have been fulfilled. So the project includes 4 pillars, and sometimes we're not, even in the media, they don't talk much about the other pillars of this project. So pillar 1 is the mandate for leadership document itself that established how government is to be reshaped. Pillar 2 was the personnel database for political appointments. So that's a part that really doesn't get talked about enough, is essentially this massive database from which the new administration was going to be drawing its staff and personnel. Pillar 3 was an online academy, essentially to be pumping out more people for that database to be choosing from. And pillar 5 is essentially what they call the playbook or the transition plan. So there's 4 different discrete aspects of the project itself. But we're going to be looking mostly at the mandate for leadership. So pulling out of that document, it touches on almost every aspect of the federal government and so many different issues that we care about here in the United Church of Christ. Essentially, it functions as what it claims to be as a manifesto or blueprint of conservative values and talking points. The term woke appears dozens of times, as does radical. And one of the quotes I pulled out from the document says that the deep state destroys America. Either the deep state destroys America or we destroy the deep state. So it's very much kind of situated in that understanding of politics writ large here in Washington. It also draws heavily off of what's called the unitary executive theory, which I won't go into any detail here, but essentially interpretation of our Constitution that really elevates not only the executive branch, but really the solitary office of the president, and gives it authority over the full branch and essentially over other branches to some extent, to override norms and checks and balances, and uses also the military authority to enforce those policies nationwide. So when we think about this document, it called for a massive overhaul of the federal workforce to both shrink its size as well as ensure what remains is loyal to the president. That is, some of you may be familiar with what's called Schedule F, which was an executive order. And estimates suggest that already over 60,000 federal employees were involuntarily fired. And the total number of departures, including voluntary buyouts, are estimated at over 200,000. We've certainly seen so much of that here in the Washington, D.C. area with so many federal employees who go to our local churches that are now out of work or have been just living in constant uncertainty. Again, just some of the high points, we've also seen the wholesale dismantling of USAID and threats to dismantle the Department of Education, while at the same time seeing the erosion of independence between the Department of Justice and the White House. And one of the quotes in that section says, quote, "We will root out the communist, Marxist, fascist, and the radical left thugs that live like vermin within the confines of our country." So again, just to highlight the ideology that emerges throughout this document. So given the timing, we can't really dive into all the different areas, but we've picked 4 areas that we've been most focused on. But before we delve into those specific 4, and I'm going to start with the first 2, it's important to say that all of these areas are critical to the United Church of Christ, and we are pushing back on them in a number of different ways. But let me start with immigration. So first, before we delve into what Project 2025 called for, what the administration has done, and how we're responding, that's going to be kind of the movements we're going to do on each of these issues. I just want to stop and really lift up from the get-go a counter narrative, which is this is just some images of how we have been responding to Project 2025 as the United Church of Christ. So just take a deep breath, knowing all that is to come now, and look at these faces, look at the hope and the joy that is represented by these. So we've been doing in our immigration responses, as you'll hear, we've been partnering a lot with our Immigration Justice Minister, Noel Anderson, our Global Hope team out of the Cleveland office, and Megan Burgert, who's new on our staff, our immigrant welcoming churches, the Immigration Collaborative, and others. So that's just kind of a glimpse of our response. So let's start with immigration, refugee justice. You can see here some of what the Project 2025 itself called for. Deploying the National Guard and active duty personnel to the border, curtailing refugee admissions, etc. So you can see here's what's happened so far. And again, these are really kind of high-level summaries of what's happened so far. But it all falls under, to quote the document itself, it calls for the initiation of the largest mass deportation project in the history of this country, is essentially what it calls for. So we know what's happening in our streets, in our neighborhoods, in terms of ICE. We know that just last 2 weeks ago, the president also issued a new presidential determination on refugee admissions, cutting it down from 140,000 of a refugee cap down to 7,500, the lowest in history, and is focusing that on Afrikaners and other nationalists from other countries. Additionally, Project 2025 would have done a couple other things, such as tearing up the Flores settlement, which would prevent the government from detaining children and families indefinitely, and reinstate the Remain in Mexico policy, forcing non-Mexican citizens to wait in Mexico while their asylum cases are pending. Both of these are currently held up in court, but even so, like, it's tried to go beyond what it has done already. And again, we know that even just this past summer, not only is this what the executive branch has done, but the Congress has played a part as well. The funding bill this summer made U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, or ICE, the largest federal law enforcement agency, giving it $45 billion for building new detention centers, and in addition to $14 billion for deportation operations. So, yeah, it's totally destructive, cruel, as many of us are witnessing in our streets, and anywhere from Chicago, from here in D.C., to LA and elsewhere. But again, looking at the third column here of what we're doing, just to highlight some of the things in that column, we've been, from this office, we've been initiating a Love Knows No Borders campaign, which culminated just about 2 weeks ago with 20 conference ministers coming here to DC. They shared stories that they gathered from their communities. We had a powerful ritual in front of the Capitol, pouring out the tears from their communities. They also engaged in advocacy meetings with members of Congress, lobbying on the Visible Act, which would call on ICE to show their faces. Really, that's a response to this past synod's resolution, which really called out the ICE as engaging in domestic terrorism in our communities. They also lobbied for the Sensitive Locations Act, which we know was reversed by this administration, as well as the No Ban Act, again, on refugee issues. So that's just a bit of how we've been responding, again, to the immigration policies within Project 2025. So we're now going to pivot before I turn over to my colleagues. I know I've had a lot to offer here to get started with, but let's turn over to LGBTQ plus justice. So take a look again at some of these images of hope, of joy, of solidarity that we've been part of. A lot of that work has been done in collaboration with our gender and sexual justice team in National Ministries, and our ward who leads that team, as well as the Open and Affirming Coalition and many others. A lot of these images came from World Pride this past summer in DC, where we welcome lots of UCC folks from around the country. So before we pivot, take a look at the hope that exists, even in the midst of what this administration is doing and what Project 2025 calls for. But we're here to talk about the document. So Project 2025 directives. So really what Project 2025 calls for is a broad attack on what it calls transgender ideology, which is essentially what we would call humanity, dignity, civil rights, to determine our self-determination, identification, and expression. So it really is writ large an attack on trans people, on LGBTQIA community. And as we know in our churches, we see things a very different way, that we know that love is louder. But this is what we're up against, folks. So here's some of the actions. So you can see the Project 25 directives, defunds trans healthcare, it called for creation of huge barriers to transgender youth and transition, proposed lenience toward businesses and owners, hospitals seeking to refuse service to LGBTQ families, etc. So what's been done so far? Here's the list of some of that. Particularly, and I would just to add to what's already been done, there's also been several recent court cases that really move forward this agenda. Just in June, in the Scrimetti case, the court upheld a Tennessee law banning gender-affirming medical treatment for minors. So that allowed the Trump executive order to stand. And we're afraid that that will embolden other states to follow suit. And then just a few weeks ago, the administration called for the enforcement of a policy regarding use of biological sex at birth on passports. So it froze a lower court's injunction. It means that for now, individuals cannot use a self-selected gender identity or an X designation on new or renewed passports. So again, there's so much here, again, that this administration has done, really attacking our siblings. But we are also active as well. And as I said, we believe that love is louder. A lot of what we've been doing is boils down to celebrating the Imago Dei in all of us, that we believe that all are created in God's image, and we are here to stand in solidarity with one another. We've passed lots of resolutions, as we know, through General Synod. We had a robust presence at World Pride. We've been advocating for the Equality Act, the conference ministers who we hear, and part of our regular advocacy work is advocating for the Equality Act. And then just to note some things that are even coming up quite soon, which is the November 20th, the National Trans Day of Remembrance, and a new resource called the Book of Love coming from our Gender and Sexual Justice Ministry staff. So friends, I know that's a lot to absorb, but let me, for the sake of time, go ahead and turn it over to my colleague Helen, who's going to talk about the next issues that we are concerned about. So Helen.
Yes, thank you so much. As we said before, I am our international policy person, and so I will be going over both foreign policy and environmental justice for you today. And so, let's see, there we go. All right. Here are some of the incredible ways that we have been showing up when it comes to foreign policy and ensuring that, as our campaign says, love knows no borders. And that is geographic, that is racial, that is gender, that is everything under the sun, because we recognize that all is created in God's wonderful image. And so as we get a little bit into foreign policy, you can see some of the directives here, really trying to refocus the State Department, as you are consistently hearing about America first. We really are seeing that this is an isolationist government, really returning to some of the previous governments, both here and other countries have done this as well, where they really only want to look at their own interests and they are not interested in any kind of global community, which is incredibly unfortunate, not only to our theology, but the ways in which we have formed as a globe, and we are interreliant and dependent on each other. And so you can see some of the things that was proposed have already taken place. The really big one that I think, are all aware of is the decimation of USAID, which is the United States Agency for International Development, that essentially no longer exists and has been a huge really toll on others. And there are studies that are working on how many deaths have resulted from the abrupt and continual cut of USAID around the world, and we are already in the hundreds of thousands, unfortunately. And you can see some of the other things that have happened around specific countries that have been targeted, as well as things like the World Health Organization that we were a large contributor to, and our funds made a huge difference. And you can see the ways in which we are pushing back, the ways in which we are saying this does not align with our theology, and we are not going to allow this to happen, or allow those around the world to be taken advantage of or left, because we know that we are called to clothe the naked and to feed the hungry and to welcome the immigrant. And so we are not only committed to that. One really important thing that I want to draw attention to is during our 35th General Synod in Kansas City this July, an emergency resolution was passed that we, the United Church of Christ, called for the full funding to be restored to USAID. And we recognize that there are mechanisms beyond our control, and that single resolution will not immediately reinstate it. But we as a denomination recognize the need for it, and we are calling for that to resume. And shortly after that, we were part of a interfaith fly-in on foreign assistance. And one of our UCC pastors came to DC and did advocating with their own members and with others to talk about the need for this, and to talk about the ways in which, even if we're not going to call it USAID, it needed to resume, and it needed to be there to help all of those that we have global partnerships with, as we do have about 250 partnerships across 89 countries in the world. And I got to be with some of those partners and mission coworkers this past weekend, and to hear some of the heart-wrenching ways that even if they did not personally receive USAID money, their people were suffering, and food was no longer in access. HIV was on the rise. People did not have the medications they needed. The majority of our partners are either education or medical. And when you're looking at that many partnerships that do this much work on the bare necessities and the human rights that go into a human just living and existing, you're seeing just a huge bereavement. And so that is something that we recognize as just incredibly heartbreaking, and we refuse to not walk alongside our partners and to take responsibility for the ways in which our government is acting. And then for environmental justice, you can see some of the ways that we have done things. The wonderful Climate Hope affiliate program that really kind of really plants the seeds in those who are not yet a part of the voting majority. And our children are making just incredible art. And so you can see that one of them was visiting the Capitol and got to share their artwork. And so, we have another just devastating amount of cuts and denial. We see that in this document, as well as unfortunately many who are elected into government at the moment, do not believe that the environment is a living part of our community, that humans will benefit from it, but not work in partnership with it. And so there were many things that the document of Project 2025 called for. And, oh, did it go backwards? There we go. And many things that did happen. And so we're seeing just horrific amounts of cuts for things while we're in a shutdown. Of course, many public lands are not available and open, which means that people are not being able to commune with nature and be in God's creation, which is horrible. And it is another aspect of where we have seen just humongous cuts into the federal government. And when we're looking at what we can do, what we will continue doing, we have a dedicated program minister, Brooks, who is phenomenal and works so hard on environmental justice, on environmental issues throughout the year. And so we really are prioritizing addressing the climate crisis, not only through having a specific programmatic minister on this, but also by making that one of our priorities programmatically for the entire national setting, and recognizing that that is something that without this work, without this priority, none of us exist. And we were created to specifically care for the earth. And we were meant to be in community and in that circle of rejuvenation and care, and not in the center of it with the earth only having a one-sided relationship, which would essentially just make us parasites. And so we have some really cool things, and we are working. If the government is not going to, we will continue that work, and especially on being carbon neutral by 2040, which is incredibly exciting, as well as some of the other incredible programs that Brooks put on and that we are able to help with the advocacy portions of at our office. And I'll pass it on to Hannah.
I'm jumping back in, Helen. Thank
Oh,
you for that.
sorry.
And certainly just to add the start my video. There we go. Sorry, talking without my video on. Just to add, certainly the destruction of the environmental justice offices has been something that we've been telling a story about, because that is going underreported and is such a big part of our legacy as the United Church of Christ. So we've gone through 4 kind of aspects of Project 2025 that we find maybe most egregious, but it's hard to discern which ones are the most egregious because there's so many. And so I wanted to quickly just list some other ones, knowing that they are also key and critical that we are following. So just briefly, in the area of civil rights, certainly the broad attack on DEI programs in general across the federal government, gutting the DOJ Civil Rights Division, 70 lawyers left that department, the politicization of the Census Bureau, etc. In the area of mental health and disability justice, which is also a concern of ours and deeply concerned for the United Church of Christ. The Department of Education has ceased resolving disparate impact claims. And the one big brutal bill imposed work requirements on Medicaid, which would deeply impact the disabled community. Likewise, in education itself, we know that there's been a lot happening there. Again, attacks on DEI. Again, the dismantling of the Office of Civil Rights within the Department of Education. The recent changes to the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program, denying those who are involved with quote unquote unlawful activities, including those who do transgender care or immigration work, the ability to get those federal loans. Finally, in abortion and reproductive rights, the CDC is now promoting family planning rather than contraceptives. And DOD recently ended funding for military to travel for abortions, and banned funding for organizations that provide abortions and education, otherwise known as the Mexico City policy, and more. That's just, again, just to touch on some of the other areas. We could have a whole nother webinar or 2 or 3 or 4 in each of these spheres and what this administration is doing, as well as certainly in the areas of how we're responding in all those areas. We have a lot of programmatic work through our Join the Movement work, Velda Love, our Minister for Racial Justice, through Sarah Lund, our Minister for Mental Health and Disabilities Justice, again for reproductive rights, our gender and sexual justice team that we work with on those issues as well. So just to touch on some of those, knowing that we don't have time to go into great detail, but let me turn it to Hannah to talk
real
about
quick, Michael, if I
to,
can jump in.
Yeah,
real quick. I just want to invite folks to go ahead and use that Q&A feature. We do have several questions that we'll get to later. You will be able to get a new toolkit, or the new toolkit, which you're about to hear. Everything will be sent in a follow-up email along with the slides and the recording. And so you should get something within 72 hours. If not, just around, you'll get it before the end of the week for sure. But I really just want to say thank you so much, Michael, and invite all of the people who are here for this webinar, for the things that Michael just shared. Like, we will be having more Nurture the Soul webinars in 2026. that delve a little bit deeper into these topics. So make sure you subscribe and enjoy and tune in every week. Why not? It's an hour you get to spend with some amazing freaking people like myself. So Michael, back to you. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ellie, for that. I just want to actually, I want to hand it to Hannah. Just, I think it's important as we think about how we are responding. We want you to be responding with us. So we know many of you already are. And she's going to talk a bit about kind of how to do that. So Hannah.
Thank you, Mike, and thanks, Ellie. And I want to take a moment before I delve into how you can get involved to just take a deep breath, because that was a lot of information. You know, the breadth of Project 2025 is so incredibly wide. It touches almost every facet of our life, and seeing its very effective and very fast implementation can be really frightening. And taking it all in a 1 hour webinar, I can imagine is overwhelming. And I want to hold space for that. I invite you, if you are having, big feelings, big questions, put them in the chat, or if there are questions our team can answer, put them in the Q&A. But just to name that there is so much grief and a great sense of despair that many of our communities are experiencing right now. Perhaps you are in this very moment, and I want to name that, invite you to take a moment, and also to remind you that those feelings of hopelessness, those feelings of despair, ultimately do not serve you. They don't serve your neighbors who may be being targeted, and they don't serve the sacred justice work of this denomination. And so as we take in all of the frightening implementation of Project 2025, I want to turn to hopefully a more positive note on what we can do about it. What are the steps that our office is taking, and what are the steps that you as an individual or your congregation can help take? So for the DC office, being so close to Congress, both relationally and physically, as Mike said, we are just across the street from the Supreme Court. One of our roles is to empower Congress to lead in holding this administration accountable. As Mike said, this is a real crisis of democracy. We're seeing our checks and balances system be tested in a way that it has not been tested in quite some time, and encouraging our members in Congress to stand up for their constitutional duty is incredibly important during this time. This is important on the federal level as well as the local level, but some of the ways that we do that are action alerts and call campaigns, which I'll speak more to on the next slide. This is one of the low lift ways that we can get the UCC involved on specific issues, trying to pass certain bills, trying to block certain bills. Of course, we also have many meetings with members of Congress. Our policy team have continued relationships with members in the House and the Senate, as well as opportunities to invite constituents like yourselves to come to DC and meet with your members. So Mike mentioned earlier last week, 2 weeks ago, we had the conference ministers from across the country come and meet with their members of Congress to talk about specific immigration bills that the UCC aligns with. And those meetings are so incredibly valuable. You know, members of Congress are always interested and excited to talk to their constituents. And if that's something that you are interested in doing, I encourage you to reach out to our office. Those meetings have incredible impact. And then, of course, letters and vote recommendations that our office will produce. And in addition to those relational meetings, we have direct action as well. So you'll see if you follow our social media, we often post about interfaith vigils that we will attend and organize alongside UCC congregations locally and or our interfaith partners here in DC. Faithful Witness Wednesdays was a very popular series of vigils that we held beginning Ash Wednesday, so March of this year until the 100th day of the Trump administration. And that was an opportunity for faith leaders in the UCC and beyond to encourage congressmen to have moral courage in standing up to the power grab that we're seeing from the executive branch. And then, of course, the Love Knows No Border Vigil, which Mike spoke to, where we had conference ministers bring stories from their areas of the country, offering anecdotes of families and individuals who've been directly impacted by policies that we've seen come up in the last administration. So in addition to letters and emails, in-person meetings, virtual meetings, and public witness, there are a lot of ways that UCC individuals can get involved. One of the most easy ways is to join our Justice and Peace Action Network. This is a network of around 30,000 individuals who are mobilized. You can be a UCC member and join. You don't have to be. You'll see as you scroll through our Action Center, which I'll share shortly, there is a variety of issues that will appeal to a lot of people of faith and people of no faith. And if you join, what you will receive is a weekly opportunity to send a pre-written but customizable letter to your member of Congress. So our policy team will write a message about a particular issue, and you'll get that message sent to your email. And when you click it, you put in your address, and it will automatically create a template that you can send to your 2 senators and your representative. You can always, and we encourage you to personalize the letter, but as you can see, there are so many issues to work on. It's very difficult to stay on top of the news, so we want to do that heavy policy lift for you guys, and so you can be able to raise your voice as much as possible. And as you can see, we've been sending a lot of letters out in 2025. Since January 1st, we have sent over 100,000 messages and petition signatures, which is incredible. Yes, yeah, lots of applause for that one. It is a really beautiful thing to see that number tick up every single week. And I think that speaks to how much the UCC cares about this justice work. So I encourage you to scan that QR code, join our email list. Andrea put the sign-up list in the chat as well, and you'll see that link come back around for the resources after the webinar ends. And here's just a very, very small amount of the issues we work on. So one of our big issues is passing the Truth and Healing Commission on the Indian Boarding Schools Policy Act. Of course, safeguarding sensitive locations, ensuring ICE accountability, protecting the refugee program, trying to encourage our Congress to protect healthcare access and make sure that everybody, that nobody has to choose between a doctor's visit and a full meal. And this is truly just a very, very small snippet of the many issues we work on. So again, that link Andrea just sent in the chat will show you our Action Center, and I encourage all of you to take a look. In addition to the Justice and Peace Action Network, just this year we published a new resource called the Toolkit for Faithful Advocacy. This is a comprehensive starter guide for faith-based advocacy. So whether or not you are brand new to the world of advocacy or you're a seasoned expert, but you just want to refresh some of the foundational skills, we highly recommend that you download this resource. In the toolkit, you'll see a couple of things. A few of them include talking points on justice issues. So all of the issues that Mike and Helen discussed and many more. We have faith-based talking points as well as secular talking points for you to use in your advocacy. We have some guides on best practices for how to call and email your elected officials. Many folks just don't even know where to start in that process, and it's incredibly easy, but sometimes you need that first how-to guide. So how to contact your elected officials, how to have an effective meeting, and of course, tips for organizing and attending a public witness. Something that our office is thinking about a lot more as we approach 2026, which is of course a midterm year, is encouraging our churches and congregations to run Get Out the Vote campaigns. You'll learn more about this in the coming year, but we encourage you to take a look at the section of the toolkit that focuses on the Our Faith, Our Vote campaign, as well as the many other resources. And here are just a few of those resources. Again, this is a free downloadable resource. You can find it in the link that Andrea just sent, or you can purchase a hard copy from UCC Resources online. So how to build successful social media presence. That's one of my areas of expertise. Conversations to avoid toxic polarization. I think at this point, we all had difficult conversations with friends, family, strangers, and how to actually find productive dialogue and not just talking at each other is an incredibly important and rare gift. Legal limitations on faith-based advocacy. This is incredibly important for churches to be mindful of, especially in the Get Out the Vote campaigns. And then, of course, how to call and email your elected official. So here's a QR code for a couple of those resources. I also encourage you all to follow us on social media. We do post quite actively on Facebook, Blue Sky, Instagram, and Twitter. And I'll leave this slide up for a moment so folks can hopefully scan the QR code, take a moment, look through the links that were just sent, and get involved with our office.
Yes, this is awesome, Hannah. Thank you so much. Thank you for everybody who is crowdsourcing in the chat. This has been, look, this virtual space has become a very special space. So I'm grateful for that. And I know Michael's responding back to one of the chats by typing an answer. So one of the questions, not one of the chats, one of the questions. But there is a really good question in here that says UCC churches could really help to counter Project 2025 by teaming up with outside groups working on the same goals who are looking for a space to hold large community meetings. Churches tend to have that space. What do you all recommend in your own experience is the best path for doing that?
Yeah,
I know
Go ahead.
go ahead, Michael, and then I'll jump in.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, literally, go to the things that these folks are holding, right? When we talk about making your space available and having folks, especially when they're like, well, what kind of Christian are you now? If you don't have a relationship with them, I would recommend going out and attending some of the things that they are doing, making regular appearances so they start to recognize you. Offer a tour to the space, come and have a meal together within the space and say, this is what we deeply care about. This is the work that we have done as a congregation and as leadership around these issues. And we recognize that we need to expand our ministry in regards to making our space available to y'all. What would that look like? And then hearing what kind of their needs and asks are. I think that would be like the first approach that I would say. But Michael, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just to emphasize that, I mean, I think right now when you think about the size and scale of Project 2025 and really just even beyond that particular program project document, more so like what is happening in the world today, we need to partner with each other more than ever. And so certainly aligning ourselves with community organizations that are doing this work, other denominations, other faith partners. Part of what this administration is trying to do, and I would say even beyond this administration, what forces of cruelty and evil are trying to do is divide us. And so to whatever extent we can come together as like-minded people of faith and conscience who want to build a just world for all, a more loving world for all, we have to be the ones to initiate that sometimes by partnering, inviting partnerships in new ways, and using whatever resources we have. Some of our churches do still have space, sanctuaries, do have resources, do have things that these movements in our communities need. And so thinking creatively about how we do that, how we use what resources we have, I think is something we are all being called to in this time.
Yeah, definitely. Helen, are you unmuting? No, okay. So I know you wanted to answer this question, Michael. What would you describe are the key ways your office works, coordinates, collaborates with both internal to the UCC like Chisholm or ONA, as well as other denominations and orgs like Interfaith Alliance? Or are you what does looking at building your colleagues among other denominations look like the UMC?
Yeah. I mean, kind of building off of what I just said a minute ago, I think partnerships right now is so critical, and building the beloved community, both in as local of a context as we can, but also organizationally, denominationally, with interfaith partners. So much of what we do here, as you saw the list of our small staff of 5, we have to do that work in partnership with others. When we go into meetings with members of Congress, yes, we can reflect the voice of the United Church of Christ, and the voice of General Synod, representing, the hundreds of thousands that we consider members of United Church of Christ. But what kind of impact can we have when we do that with the Lutherans and the Presbyterians and the Jewish community and the Muslim community? And we go into those offices with the National Council of Churches and say, we represent hundreds of millions of voices in this that align our values together in opposing this policy. And so everything we do here is very much in partnership. And to the question more, so we need to do that internally as well. That we can't do this in silos from each other, either as the United Church of Christ from our faith partners or as a DC office from other entities of the UCC. So that includes CHISM. We have a really close working relationship with CHISM, again, with lots of different staff configurations. And I think it goes not only in terms of crossing over the national setting itself and other UCC affiliated institutions, but also I feel really called to right now work in partnership across the settings of the church, working with our conference ministers as we just had them here, reaching out through the associations really that knows oftentimes who are the justice advocates in an association, working with those association ministers and with our local churches directly, that we really do need to build this movement. We need to right now, as Hannah said, we've collected well over 100,000 messages to Congress. That's over 4 times what we had last year. What would that look like if we quadrupled that again next year? And what would that movement keep looking like? And that takes reaching out to each other on multiple levels at the same time, not just through our structures, but also just from church to church and individual advocate to individual advocate.
Yeah, I love that. I'll let you, Michael, get back to some of those questions I know that you were typing answers to into
Sure.
the Q&A. And I just really want to thank I like Hannah and Helen. Helen, outside of your shoe game, your advocacy work is on point. It is so, so amazing. And I am so honored to be around younger folks who are forward thinking, who are full of hope and belief. And Hannah, your meticulous attention to details means that I know that the folks that you are advocating for out of that office as a whole of the United Church of Christ are well taken care of. You are also so full of soul and spirit. And I don't know about your shoe game, but we'll get there. Next time I see you in person, I'm excited to see you in December. Michael, it is such an honor and a pleasure. I know I always say things that you kind of tilt your head at and like, why does this Ellie person say this stuff to me? And you still love and accept me and hear those alternate points of view on things. And so I am grateful for that. And I want to thank each of you who've joined us virtually. The recording with all of the links into chat, or a lot of the links into chat, will be included for sure. I hope that if you heard something that was important, that you go back and rewatch, right? It will be up on our YouTube channel within 48 hours. And so rewatch it, take notes, share it with somebody, call a meeting after church and, around coffee hour and have this playing, and then invite somebody to come along with you in your journey to do the advocacy work, because this is hard work. This is hard work. And sometimes you're going to need to take a break. And I love how each of you invited us during this webinar today to take a break, right? To just breathe, to pay attention to our bodies, because this is not going to be over next month, right? We are in this for the long haul. And in order to be in the long haul, you have to care for yourself. You have to bring others alongside with you, and you have to do this in community, okay? I know you know that, but sometimes maybe your ears were open in a different way today. I want to thank our tech and media team for helping to make this and all of our webinars possible in both live form and in post-viewing form. And beloveds, we're back. We're back on Thursday for part 2 of our 3-part series on land. This 3-part series examines how our relationship to land varies not only geographically, but spiritually, and in how the role of Christianity has had in our relationship to land, and of course, how those relationships inform how we live, work, and worship alongside others. In part 2, we're sitting down with representatives from the small town and rural communities who will share about how being stewards to the land informs how they believe in God and how this connects them to their own community members. And so now I go ahead and turn it over to you, Reverend Michael, to take us out with a benediction.
Yeah, well, thank you, Ellie, for that invitation, to my colleagues for all the great work, and to all of you for joining. Before I end with the benediction, I want to share just an image. We all live and work here in DC. It's been a hard time. We often walk by the Heritage Foundation on our way into this office. It is about 2 blocks away. It has a monstrous footprint here on Capitol Hill. It's about the size of a city block, probably 10 floors high. Right now it has a giant placard of Charlie Kirk on the side of it. And when I walk by it, I often think of a David and Goliath type of a moment that we are living in, where we have this giant behemoth of an institution here on Capitol Hill that is pumping out things like Project 2025. Meanwhile, here in a tiny office with resources given with love from our churches, we are trying to pump out, countering that with love as best we can. And so this may be a David and Goliath time, but we also know how that story ends. We know that we will keep slinging our smooth stones as faithfully as we possibly can with your support together. And I'm so grateful to be in the struggle with all of you. And so with that image, let us pray. God of small things, God who brings down barriers and walls, we ask, God, that you would move mightily here through our small stones, through our faithfulness. We know that this is a time of great suffering for our siblings, for our neighbors. God, keep giving us hope, keep giving us compassion and mercy for those who are being impacted. Let us seek to raise their voices. Let us seek to contribute what we can using our churches, our resources, our faithfulness. God, help us to build the just world that you call us to build together. In your name we pray. Amen.
Thank you. Thank you, beloveds. Be well. Happy holidays. See y'all
Bye-bye.
soon.
Siblings in Christ, if you are moved by this conversation, if what's been offered here has helped enhance your ministry or has nurtured your soul for the journey, please consider donating to the annual fund of the United Church of Christ by texting UCC to 41444. Your support will help to provide programs like this, which are an essential part of our ministries in the United Church of Christ. Thank you for your support. Be blessed on your journey and know that you are not alone. We are holding you in prayer. Amen.